Hi guys, this week we're going to look at families. So I wanted to just give you a definition of the family. So the first would be from the Census Bureau, which is just two or more persons related by birth, marriage, or adoption who live together. So this could be just siblings together. This could be two people in a relationship, could be people that adopt a child or foster a child as well. Well, typically a lot of people use the words nuclear family, and that typically means that it's a parent and child or parents and children. And it could be a single parent though, it could be same-sex parents, it could be a child in fostering or adopting as well. A lot of times people also use the word family of orientation or family of origin, and that's the family in which you were born. So if you were adopted, you might talk about your family of origin or your family of orientation, meaning the family that your kind of biological family or the family you were born into, now you have an adoptive family as well. We have a family of procreation, and this is the family that develops when a person enters into a relationship or a partnership and has children. Or if they're not in a relationship, if they just have children. And then our extended family are the people who, like our kinship groups. So our grandparents, our distant cousins, whoever you kind of depend on. That might be for kind of support in a family type environment. That might be your extended family. So some basic family functions are reproduction. So having children, adopting or fostering or having them yourselves. Socialization or education, so what are our values, beliefs, and attitudes, or our skills? That typically comes from your culture, and that's transmitted to a new generation. How you understand social roles, so what you do or don't do. So social roles in a family might come from your race, from your ethnicity, from the language that you have, and from your culture as well. So what does it mean to be a girl? What does it mean to be rich? What does it mean to be poor? What does it mean to be a boy? All of that is part of your family, and your family teaches that. We should have some kind of economic support, typically that you're getting food, you're having some kind of housing, you have protection as well. And then we have the idea kind of generational wealth, and this is the type of wealth that you receive from your parents, which kind of gives you your status or standing within a society as well. And then hopefully we would hope with this last one that it's love. So attachments, bonding, interactions, supporting children, holding children, loving on children should be part of a basic family, but not, unfortunately, not in every family you get all of these types of things. Sometimes part of it might be missing. Now, families always change. A lot of times people want to think that families are the same, but it's not. Families are always changing. People are breaking up, people are getting married, people are getting divorced, people die, people are born, children grow up and leave the home and start their own families as well. So families are always changing. It's in a stage, it's in a kind of, it's our organic kind of ongoing life span. Changes are always part of families. So families never remain the same. We also know that more and more people are entering into partnerships, but are less and less likely to actually get married, either at the state level, like having an official wedding or having getting a marriage certificate, or even entering into maybe religious weddings as well. It's really kind of decreasing. It's gone down about 30% in the last kind of 4 decades. So a lot more people are single parenting or step parenting, and a lot of people in new generations are just kind of choosing not to get married. So that's a change that we might see in families and in our society, is that it's just a trend towards not doing this, and that would be something that we would need to be aware of if we assume that everybody in a partnership is married. Not always. And that's why we're saying partnership instead of marriage, or talking about your partner instead of spouse or wife or husband, because you can't just look at two people and be able to tell if they're married or not. So saying partner can be a better way to talk about that. We're going to have lots of different types of unique families. So adoptive families, single parent families, same-sex headed families as well. And a lot of times we want to consider this not typical. But we want to make sure that we honor that children come from different types of families. So Mother's Day is a huge one. If you don't have a mom, or you don't have a person in your life that you've identified as a mother because they're dead, they're gone, you're being raised by two dads, what would that make you feel in a classroom if you don't have a mom? If your mom died a year ago and you're having a Mother's Day celebration and they ask you to bring your mom in, and she's dead, that would probably make you not feel great. So you might want to ask families before you just go ahead and schedule things like Mother's Day or Father's Day. If families don't have that, that might make some person feel really bad, and they should either have a heads up or changing it so that they can bring somebody else in, or not having it as well. Also, who's invited? So if you have two moms, are both moms invited? If you have an adopted mom and a biological mom, who also gets invited? Both? Neither? If you have tons of moms, you have a stepmom, you have a biological mom, you have an adopted mom, you have your grandma who raised you, are all four people invited? So those are the types of things you have to think about. And I'm not saying, and I'm not telling you to cancel Mother's Day or not do it or anything like that. I'm just saying you need to be more aware of it. Transracial adoption is another issue as well, because this will be people are quite nosy. And so if your mom's Black and your dad's white, and you are mixed race, you'll get a lot of questions. If you look more like one or you look like a mixture, is this your real mom? Is this your natural mom? Which is kind of a weird thing to be saying. And I'm not sure that people at the grocery store need to ask questions like that, but they do. So the child is also going to realize that they look different as well. And so they're going to have questions that need to be answered honestly and developmentally with what they can understand. This is some children talking. I'll play this one. This one is about the struggle for identity. So issues with being transracial or adopted transracially. So you might be of one race and you're adopted or fostered by somebody of a different race.
I used to get very angry growing up when I would look at my dad's den or my mom's bookshelf and see how to raise a Black child. I'm like, why do you need a manual for me that you didn't have for your other three kids? But there wasn't that a recognition that, hey, we're on a different track here, and we don't have all the answers, and we need to look to people who have parented Black children, who are Black parents, to give us the answers.
You're white. Why did you want to adopt a Black kid or an Asian kid or a Latino kid? And there should be some sort of we attach so much significance to how they answer that question that they can't just give us a flippant answer. Before they adopt, I think that they need to really think about how are you going to answer that question at different stages, when your kid is 6, when your kid is 10, when your kid is 16, when your kid is 20, when your kid totally rejects you and goes back to the culture of origin, let's say, because sometimes that happens, and they go through their anti-white stage. What are you going to tell that kid? Why did you adopt them? What were you hoping to prove? Or what were you hoping to accomplish? To turn them into a white person so they could go to college and live out the American dream? Or to raise another strong, proud, culturally connected individual of color that's going to help liberate their race or their people? I mean, what are your motivations? And I think the way you answer that is really, really significant.
All right, I loved that. It's super short, but I think it's that part where he's saying, what are you going to say at 6, at 10, at 15, at 20 when they reject you? So I think that it's good to hear real life stories from people about going through this. So I'm also, is this one? Nope, that one's not going to play. A lot of times I might have a parent who's in jail or they're gone from a family as well. And a parent especially being gone because they're in jail especially, there's going to be a lot of stigma attached from the community, that they're incarcerated, that they did something wrong, that they're a felon. But we want to support for the child. So we want to tell them it's not their fault. We want to kind of minimize the stigma that child might be feeling. We also want to link a child with groups to support this. And this might be more middle childhood and adolescence, and more high schools and colleges are having clubs for children whose parents are in jail, because they're going to have unique challenges that they're going to need support from. So that would be something that I couldn't really talk to you about because I've never experienced that. So somebody who's going through that as a child, you know, visiting your parent, not being able to visit your parent, writing letters, all of that, that is a good thing for them to get support from somebody else. Now, the most unusual source for amazing support for children in prison is Sesame Street. So I'm going to play this video for you guys.
Okay, question. What comes to mind when you think of Sesame Street? Elmo, Big Bird, brought to you by the letter O. Well, Sesame Street has branched out over the years into addressing some pretty hot button issues like, you know, divorce, AIDS. But this latest topic has some people saying, oh no. Watch this.
You seem kind of sad.
Listen, Alex, whatever it is that's on your mind, you don't have to tell us. But we're your friends, and you can always talk to us if you want.
It's just all this talk about my dad and where he is got me really upset.
Oh, because your daddy's away? And you miss him?
Yeah, but because of where he is, too. My dad's in jail.
That video is from this online toolkit for adults. It teaches parents and caregivers how to help their kids cope when mom or dad is incarcerated. Entertainment journalist and pop culture expert John Murray is editor-in-chief of alwaysalist.com. He joins me, and Krista Smith is senior West Coast editor for Vanity Fair. So welcome to both of you. We're going to talk movies in a second, but let's stick with Sesame Street because, listen, you know, you think of Sesame Street, they push the boundaries. We mentioned AIDS, we mentioned divorce. Remember the whole Bert and Ernie sexual ambiguity thing? Do you think this issue of helping kids cope with incarcerated parents progressive or too much for preschoolers? John, to you first.
I think it's a great tool, actually. You know, I grew up, my father was in prison from the time that I was 3 years old. And at an early age, my mom explained to me exactly where he was because at the time we lived in a small town and she wanted me to know my family dynamic before some neighborhood busybody shared it with me. And so it allowed me to become comfortable with it. I understood it. And it also taught me that, you know, when you do things in life, there's a consequence for it. And so it made me very cognizant of the things that I did. And I went on the path of not wanting to get in any trouble so that I wouldn't end up like my father. So I think it's imperative to teach the kids at an early age.
Let me ask you a follow-up to that, Krista. Just hang on just a second. This is interesting. So did your mom ever tell you later in life that it was tough to explain to you early on and maybe something like this kind of Sesame Street toolkit would have helped?
Well, it's funny, you know, I grew up watching Sesame Street, but I also grew up playing with Legos and Tonka toys and things of that nature. So, you know, she definitely, I know it was something hard for her to explain, and nobody wants to have to tell your child that. But these kids, think about it. Now they're in the digital age. So they're babysat with iPads and tablets. They can Google their family name, and their parents' mugshot will show up online. So you have to...
So I think he makes a great point. Children, you know, babies are born into prison. Toddlers have parents that are arrested in front of them. So these things happen, and for there to be a resource, so you can go, I put the link up here for you guys. They have amazing resources, and this is just one of them. They also have ones for military families, so if the parent is just gone, and they're gonna be gone for 18 months on a deployment, they have resources for that. They have resources for single parents. So Sesame Street, I think, has just done a really good job, because this is the reality for some children, and giving parents a way to kind of talk about it and not have that child have stigma can be really important, especially as children get older. And like he said, you know, you can Google that, or a lot of police departments release people's mugshots on Facebook. So how would it feel if you were on Facebook and your mugshot came up and you didn't even know that they were in jail? And then you're going to have to kind of go through that process of understanding it. So guys, we also have families who are Child Protective Services involved as well. So there's a lot of stigma and shame that a family is going to feel because they've been identified as an abuser. So if there's been an investigation and that's been found to happen, you know, that can be a really difficult thing because you have committed abuse. Just because you're CPS involved doesn't mean that the child has been removed from you. They might stay with, the child might continue to stay with their parent. They might stay with a different family member. They might have different types of visitation. So there might be a lot of confusion, especially the younger the child is. Why don't I live with my family? Or if they're an infant and toddler and they can't even have that explained to them, why are things always changing? Why all of a sudden can't they be with their parent? And then reinforce that they are safe and people are looking out for their best interest. I think the thing with families and all of this is just kind of feeling that stigma that the parent might be feeling or the family feeling that the child is somewhat protected from. Because the child didn't do anything. The child didn't do anything to receive the abuse. The child didn't do anything to have their parent be put in jail. So removing that stigma and letting them know that somebody's looking out for their best interests can be really important as well. Then we have parents who have violence, so intimate partner violence, domestic violence. So, there's a restraining order. They can be hard to get sometimes, but the parent needs to comply. And that can be difficult if you are still trying to maintain a relationship with the child that's involved in a situation where you've been told to stay away. If in schools as well, we need to have we need to have a copy of the actual physical restraining order, and then we have to comply with it as well. So we might really, really like that parent, but if the restraining order is saying that the parent can't be there, can't pick up, can't visit, we have to comply. And if the parent tries to come, we need to just call the cops and let them figure it out. And that can be hard if we've developed a relationship with both parents. That can be hard sometimes, but we have to comply with what the government says. And then we have to support the child through it, that they're going to be sad, that they're going to be hurt, that they might still love the person who was being violent, and that's okay. You can still love that person, but we also need to keep you safe. And then we also have military families as well. And I grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Navy, so I understand this. And we in Southern California have lots of military around us, from Air Force bases to Marines to Navies. To sailors, there are unique needs of military.
There are more than 1 million children whose parents are on active military duty in the U.S., most of whom attend public schools. They average 6 to 9 moves before the end of high school. It's also common to have a parent gone for long periods of time. Some schools don't know who these children are or how to support them, but that is starting to change. Kavitha Cardoza with our partner, Education Week, has our weekly segment, Making the Grade.
Children from Shelton Park Elementary School have been working with a nearby military installation on an oyster restoration project. Many are military children. They've spent months measuring and graphing their results.
Looks like it's at 15.
Base Commander Jolie says these educational partnerships are a win-win. Oysters help filter the water his troops train in, and
the kids get the opportunity to learn about oysters, and it really helps the base.
More important, he says, these interactions help school staff understand some of the challenges military children face.
At one point, my boys had been in 5 different schools in like a 2.5-year period. And so having that and having a community and a school system that understand that dynamic really allows those children to be able to come in so that they aren't lost.
Franzen says knowing their kids are supported helps service members concentrate on their jobs and stay in the military. But because nationally less than 1% of the US population serves, these children's challenges often go unnoticed. Teacher Cynthia DeFore says her military students bring different perspectives to class discussions.
They just are so used to moving and going new places, so the curiosity is kind of ingrained in them.
But for these children who are just 10, moving doesn't always feel positive.
I started in Italy, and then I moved to New York, and then I moved to Virginia.
I always make friends, and then I have to leave. Military children, they move and move and move, and that doesn't really make me happy at all.
Frequent transitions can also mean an inconsistent and uneven education. Eileen Huck with the National Military Family Association says that's because public schools vary so much. Some have many military children.
They set up welcome centers for families. Garrison commanders are members of the school board, but we also have school districts that just have a few military connected kids, and it can be more difficult for teachers and school district personnel in those situations to recognize the needs of those kids.
A federal report found there are no national public data on military-dependent students' academic progress, attendance, or long-term outcomes, such as college attendance or workplace readiness. Advocates hope having a military identifier on enrollment forms will help track how well public schools are meeting these students' needs.
We're one of the largest military connect.
So I think that was a good point, is we don't have a lot of that data, but as educators, as people working with children or with these children in our Southern California community, how can we support military families who might just be with us for a certain or smaller amount of time and then move on to another military base? How can we support those types of families and make sure that they have the support they need, not just educationally, but also being supported in the community, making friends. So we always make sure that when we have, like last year, we had a Marine be the coach of our daughter's Little League. And so we kind of went out of our way to kind of welcome them to our community because they had just moved, and inviting them to parties and things like that. Even though we didn't know each other very well, just to make sure that the child and the family felt welcomed into our Oceanside community. Families with stigmatized jobs. This might be sex workers, and we're one of the biggest kind of sex trafficking areas. So some of our families might be current sex workers, and this would include strippers, prostitutes, people who do webcam things in order to make money, or they're getting out of that, but they might still have the stigma because they used to do it, or if they were sex trafficked coming out of that. People who are drug dealers or felons, people who do really dirty jobs like sanitation and clean up porta potties and things like that. Within stigmatized jobs, it's hard to, because some of these jobs might be illegal. So being a sex worker, with a prostitute or a drug dealer, that's illegal. So you're going to have to decide within your own workplace, are you accepting children of this because the child isn't doing anything illegal, or are you taking kind of a hard stance that that's not okay, or not going to welcome the family? And that's okay. You can do it to your own kind of idea about that, or your workplace is what their laws are. If it is legal, but it might be stigmatized, does the job that the parent do make them a lesser or worse parent? One of my first jobs when I was 19, we had this mom who would drop off, and then she said she worked at nights, so then she would go home and she would sleep. And so she looked really tired in the morning, but then she would typically come back 6 or 7 hours later and be more upbeat because she just had some sleep. And she was super friendly. She would volunteer, bring toys in. She was fantastic. And all of the other people, because I was new at this job, would kind of and I could never figure out why, because I thought, oh wow, she's great, she's really helpful. And it turns out she was a stripper, and that's why she was working nights, and that's why she needed to go home and sleep. And I never kind of put it together, but at that point it was kind of a nice thing for me, is because I had developed a relationship with her without knowing what her kind of stigmatized job was, and it kind of didn't really change anything because she was still really nice, really friendly, a great mom, super helpful, volunteered in the classroom. I mean, as a teacher, I can't think of anything kind of more, and I didn't really kind of care at the end of the day what her job was. What is going on? So that is it for today. I've gone over a bunch of different kind of family situations. And this is one of 2 lectures. So this one's on families, and the next one is on socioeconomic status as well. So I will see you guys online.